Like I always tried to find a way to make my direct reports. I tried to make their life easier. He's like, I went in with the idea of like always trying to make their life easier, right? Figured out what aspect of their day to day did they not enjoy, or they not good at, or they just didn't want to do. And I tried to make their life easier.
Welcome back to Curiosity Class, the podcast where we break down complex topics into easy to understand ideas and bite-sized pieces. My name is Jeff Album, and I've been a curious person my entire life. Inspired by Albert Einstein's quote, "If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough," we aim to make learning accessible and engaging. On this show, we're going to bring you experts from various fields, ranging from personal finance to physics, to help you understand everything from 401ks to how airplanes fly. So let's dive in and satisfy our curiosity together. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Curiosity Class. I am super honored and humbled to be joined by my now good friend, Kevin, of Sunrise Capital. Kevin, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here.
Do you want to give just like a 10,000 foot overview of who you are and how we got connected? Well, I can say how we got connected, but why don't you 10,000 foot of who you are?
Yeah, sure thing. So again, as you mentioned, Kevin Bupp, I'm the CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors. We're a boutique real estate equity firm that focuses on two different verticals: manufactured housing communities being one, and parking investments being the other. So think about parking lots, parking garages. I've just a little background. I've been a full-time investor now for over 2 decades. Bought my first investment property at the age of 20. I'm 45 now, so I've been at this quite a long time. And I like to say that I've never had a real job, and real estate's pretty much been it. So been through a couple cycles now. Real estate cycles, '08 being a big one, and have owned and invested in just about every type of real estate that exists, starting with single family investments to multifamily to various types of commercial, self-storage, office, retail, a litany of others, and ultimately landed on the two that I just mentioned about 10 years ago. Again, manufactured housing communities and then parking. So that's what we do, and we own and operate assets in 18 different states at present time, and have a current portfolio worth roughly about $350 million. So, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So leave it at that.
Man.
It's probably a lot of blanks to fill in there, but ultimately that's the elevator pitch.
You just made the episode markers. Now we know all the chapters. It's perfect.
Yeah.
So, and remind us where you're based out of physically?
I'm in the Tampa Bay area, Florida.
Okay, cool. And you operate properties across 18 states?
We do, correct. Yeah, basically northeast, southeast, and some Midwestern states.
Okay, fantastic. Man, I want to dive into all that. So maybe let's start with your first deal. So walk us through, you're 20 years old, you get an investment property. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll back up to 19. I always joke and say that real estate found me. I didn't find it. I was going to community college at the time, attending bar in the evenings, having a lot of fun, making really good money. I'd always been entrepreneurial from an early age, shoveling snow, mowing grasses, got a paper route at the age of 12. Always wanted to make my own money. Self-taught myself how to install electronics into cars. Back then it was cool to have, stereo systems and amplifiers and all that kind of stuff in your car. Aging myself by saying that, because I don't know if that's a cool thing nowadays or not, but just basically taught myself how to make money at an early age, because I wanted certain things, the coolest BMX bike, sporting gear, dirt bikes, things like that. And my parents just didn't have a lot of discretionary income. Both my parents were working parents. Neither one went to college, but we had a stable household. So we weren't rich, we weren't poor. We had a very stable household, didn't go without really, but we didn't have a lot of excess either. So there was always things I wanted, and I knew, ultimately I wasn't going to ask my parents for it, nor did I want to put a burden on them. So I figured out ways to do it myself, or fund those things myself. And so fast forward to 19, I was trying to figure out my way through life, didn't know really what it was going to be. And I met a gentleman by the name of David. He was a local real estate investor. Met him through a girl I was dating. This girl, her mother was dating David, right? So it was kind of an odd, introduction. But ultimately, David was a local real estate guy in Pennsylvania where I grew up, and I just befriended him by being over at her mother's house, often seeing her, and got to know David, pretty well. Is just a cool dude, just very different than like how I looked at my parents. We didn't know any business owners, we didn't know any entrepreneurs. I mean, all my parents' friends and all my neighbors, they worked. The husband worked, the wife worked, everyone worked, right? And David just had a different swagger to him. He drove a very different type of vehicle than what we had. Seemed to have a lot of flexibility in the schedule, dressed a little differently, and just presented himself a little differently. And I don't know if that's necessarily attributed to all entrepreneurs, but to me, it was like, that's kind of what I attribute it to. Like, he's just this business owner. This guy's got it down. Right. And so that was intriguing to me. And I found out that he owned real estate, and I didn't know what that meant, other than he owned real estate, rental properties. People rented him, paid his mortgage each month, and he had some excess left over that ultimately was the money that he lived on. And but long story short, he invited me to a conference, Jeff, at the age of 19. Again, I known him for a few months. He invited me to a conference, and I, absolutely said yes. It was a 3-day conference in Philadelphia, and that was the start of it. I went to this conference with him. It had already been paid for. His business partner couldn't attend, and I didn't know I was going to learn. I literally had never read a book. I didn't understand. I understood the basic premise of what he did, but that was it. And I went and attended, and I got excited. I met a lot of folks there that were, I didn't feel like any smarter than I was, and they were making a lot of money, and they had, a variety of different types of businesses in real estate, mostly, investing in single family and small multifamily properties. And that was what really kicked off the excitement. I came back from that event, and I knew that I needed to figure out a way to keep the momentum going and keep the excitement going. And so I essentially went to David and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And it was basically, come work come to work for you for free, whatever you need, literally whatever you need. He didn't have an assistant per se. He had a kind of a silent business partner that did a lot of lending for him. But he didn't really have he was a solopreneur, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And I offered to work for free, whatever that was, returning phone calls, placing, back then it was in the newspaper, placing classified ads for his rentals when they became vacant, picking up supplies at Home Depot for his contractors, dropping off leases, whatever he needed. I was willing to help, and he accepted. And so that was the start of it. I worked for him for free for like a year and a half, and then I bought that first property at the age of 20. So I worked for free, understanding how he said it, who he said it to, why he said it, just the basics of the business. I was also introduced to kind of his immediate network of people, and just I learned a lot in that year. And then at the age of 20, with some bartending money I had saved, and also with a private lender that David connected me with, I was able to buy that first property. So it was a really rough rundown, basically a row home in Pennsylvania. It was in Harrisburg, where I grew up. It was in the city, and there's lots of row homes in the city. And it was a really distressed row home, and not the best neighborhood. You're looking back, it's just location's everything. Everyone knows that. I think. I mean, that's kind of the first premise I hit on. And it probably wasn't the best location, but it was the right price, and the numbers seemed to make sense. And so I bought it. I think I paid roughly $28,000 for the home. It needed about $20,000 worth of rehab, so it was a big rehab for my first property, and ended up getting it renovated again with the resources I learned through David and met through David, and ended up renting it out. It took me about 5 months, a little bit longer than I anticipated. I didn't do the work myself. I had, contractors and things like that did the rehab, and that was it, man. That was the kickoff of it. And, just kind of built it from there. I tried not to reinvent the wheel. I just, what David did seemed to work. And so I followed his model for the most part. And continued buying more property through my early to mid 20s, and built up quite a big portfolio in a couple of years. And I've been through different iterations of my business over the years. I lost pretty much everything in 2008, had to rebuild it again. Like I said, I've owned just about every type of real estate out there. Today, it's solely focused on those two asset classes I'd mentioned to you. And again, it's 25 years now. Again, I age myself when I say that, but been at this quite a bit of time now.
So that's so cool, man. So for that first deal, that single family home in Harrisburg, do you remember after the renovations what it rented for, and then what your mortgage was?
Yeah, it's a good. I should. It's funny. Like I'm one of those rare birds that like. I think it rented for like $650 a month, and I think my all in was like $400 a month, and it was less than $300 of actual cash flow on a monthly basis.
Okay.
I'm one of those rare birds. I don't ever take like before and after. I don't have like this, and I've done so many transactions, like even stuff we do today, like my business partner and our team, they're like, when you're out in the field, can you please take photos of what we're like, our projects that we're working on, and they have to force me to do it. I've never been good at that. If I didn't have my wife by my side, I probably wouldn't have pictures of our children and our family. Right. So I've never been good about like I kind of just like I do a deal and I'm on to the next. The do a deal, and like I enjoy that piece of it, and I'm really bad about documenting the process along the way. So I give you estimates because honestly, I do not remember exactly what it was, but I knew that it was less than $300 a month. And the reason why I remember that is because I very quickly realized that David's business model was to buy and hold. He bought everything, and he had been at this now for he was like 25 years older than I was, right? So like he had been at this for a number of decades, and everything he bought with the intent of holding and renting it. And I realized very quickly that I used all the money I'd saved up tending bar to use as a down payment contribution to this deal, and that it was going to take me quite a bit of time to save up enough money with that measly piece of cash flow that I had coming in to buy the next property. And so I ended up selling that one within the first year because I realized that what I really need to do was I need to basically every time I had a deal, I had to typically wholesale like 2 or 3 of them and get a pop of money. Just find a good deal at the right price, sell it to an end user like a David that actually had the wherewithal and the staying power to buy it and keep it, make a quick profit, and then basically parlay those profits into a rental that I could hold. And so I would flip 2 or 3, keep one, flip 2 or 3, keep one. And I did that for about the first probably year and a half, 2 years before I established enough capital, established enough track record and relationships, credit, so that I could start truly doing some cash out refinances. And I had a number of private lenders I was working with. It wasn't only just my capital I was working with. So
Gotcha.
Anyway, yeah.
And were these all in the local market that you lived in?
For the first 2 years, yeah. So I moved down to Florida where I'm at now in 2002, and so basically from 2000 to 2002, it was all in my hometown. I did a couple handful of deals, and then really things picked up when I moved to Florida. I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's the capital of PA, but it's a small market. There's a lot more growth there that's happened over the last 10 years than had historically happened. And so it was just a very stagnant market. Not a lot of people came, not a lot of people, went. I mean, it was just not a lot of growth there. But when I moved to Tampa, it was like a new world. A lot large, not a huge market, but a lot larger market, lots of growth happening, lots of population growth, just very progressive in nature. And it gave me the opportunity to kind of just strap on some rockets, and I met a few others that were doing just big things, a lot of transactions, and ultimately there's a gentleman that became my second mentor, and I met him within a few months of moving to Tampa, and really it was David owned about 30 properties, and this guy I met owned like 800 single family homes, and so it was opened my eyes to like a bigger picture of like, man, it's just bigger numbers, right? That's it. Like literally, there's a way to do exactly what you're doing, but do it in a scalable manner. And
right.
And so that's when I really hit the ground running. Is why I moved to Florida. It really opened my eyes to just a bigger picture, and I was ready to hustle. I wasn't married at the time, didn't have kids, and all I had was the time in the day to go grind and make things happen.
And what brought you to Florida originally?
I just, growing up, my family, we love skiing. We go out a couple times a year. We love the snow. But I am very much a warm weather guy. I love the ocean. I love water, and I love lots of sunshine. So, and I was like that growing up. I always got I had seasonal, I wouldn't say seasonal depression, but I definitely did not enjoy, come October, when the days got shorter, when it got colder, when all the leaves fell off the tree, gray for weeks at a time. I hated every bit of it, and I couldn't wait to go somewhere where the sun was shining at least 300 days a year. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Man, so it seems like there's been kind of throughout your story, at least so far, there's been definitely mentorship is a huge key, right?
Yeah.
How would you say, like, now knowing what you know, because you're probably in a different position now where you're probably mentoring people, I'd imagine, quite a lot, or at least in the position to do so. So if you could give advice to people who are coming up and kind of you when you were 19 and you were trying to attract a mentor or find a mentor, everyone says, you got to add value, right? That's the thing you always hear, add value, add value. What does that mean to you? So like if you, as the mentor, someone's coming to you, hey man, I want to learn about real estate. I want to get into this. I want to do what you're doing, whatever, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the add value piece is critical. I mean, we all only have so much time in a day. I mean, I'm pretty busy running this business, busy with my family, and so surely I get a lot of people that reach out, just can I pick your brain? Can I do this, that, and the other? And I just, not that I don't have time for it, but I really don't have time for it, right? Like there's just not enough time in the day. I really want to help everybody, and that's honestly that's one of the reasons why I started my podcast 11 years ago. Was that was one of the primary reasons. Is to I forget there's other folks that wanted to learn and to talk about the things that I was doing in my business, commercial real estate investments. And so, in my mind, like that's a one to many approach of mentoring, of giving back advice, talking about the things that are working for me in my business, the things that aren't working, right? And so, that's the way to actually reach the masses. But just back to your original question, it really is about adding value. Like, I mean, that is it. I mean, so when I met David, like I just knew I'd read a few books. I talked to my uncle about this. My uncle was a sales guy, worked for a large hardware chain, and he had been a sales guy his entire life, and he was really into like self improvement, and he had like the old Zig Ziglar tapes and a bunch of those types of things he had shared with me at a young age. And I just remember him. I remember he didn't go to college. He was probably the one. None of my family, my parents, my grandparents, like no one really. College wasn't a thing for us. I mean, it was all blue collar. My grandfather worked at steel mill. My father worked. Um, he had a good job actually, worked his way up, but ultimately my mom was an admin, data administrative person, and just very low level paying jobs. But my uncle, he didn't go to college, but he was probably the most successful in my immediate sphere. And he was a sales guy. And the funny thing, he just retired like 2 years ago, which is crazy. He's like 77 years old. He's been literally an on the road sales warrior for like, I don't know how many decades that is, but a long time. But he worked his way up and he made a lot of money, and he didn't have a college degree. And to me, like that was required back then. Like that was like you had to have a college degree to do anything meaningful in your life, right? And that's how I was raised. Like it was either you go to UPS and you're comfortable getting a job, schlepping boxes, and that's fine because they have benefits and all is well. Not to shoot down people that work at UPS. I'm not saying that, but like that was kind of where my mind was set. And if I wanted to do more than that, I needed to go actually get a good degree. And I wasn't really academically driven to do that. It just wasn't a thing for me. But I talked to my uncle, and I remember having a conversation with him about how he worked his way up in the company. Literally, he worked at the hardware store. I mean, as a stocking shelves, literally, and during high school, like he started this for this company he worked for, and ultimately, he's like, I always tried to find a way to make my direct reports, I tried to make their life easier. He's like, I went in with the idea of like always trying to make their life easier, right? Figured out what aspect of their day to day did they not enjoy, or they not good at, or they just didn't want to do. And I tried to make their life easier. And by doing that, he stuck out, right? Like he was always the one that was thought of when there was an opportunity to advance within the company, right? And so like that just always stuck with me. It's like, how can I make someone's life easier? How can I, if I want to be where they're at, how can I make their life easier, right? And ultimately it goes back to adding value. And so, for David, I saw when I met David, like I said, he was like 25 years older than me, and I saw that he struggled with technology. I mean, I watched him struggle to put together this very basic PowerPoint presentation for one of his new private lenders he was trying to borrow money from. I mean, like it was the simplest PowerPoint I've ever seen, and like it took him 3 hours and it still looked like crap, right? And so I was like, well, I don't even know PowerPoint, but I can learn it. I know that I can figure out this really quickly and at least make it look better than what he did, right? And so he also struggled with email for whatever reason. He would return a phone call, but he would have an inbox full, like it'd be overflowing, right? And like that's the time and age when like he had to adapt, right? He just wasn't adapting, and so I made his life easier, and in return for that, he saw value from me, and ultimately was willing to allow me to be around him. So just through osmosis, I learned the business, right? Like there was no curriculum. It was just like, hey, let me be around you, help you out. And then, by default, I'm going to learn it. And I kind of did the same thing with my second mentor, Rod, who I met when I moved to Florida. This is the guy that owned 800 houses, had a huge business. And I met him literally through I saw an ad. This back. I think it was like in a newspaper or some type of publication. Basically, it was an investor based, 2 hours south of me, that needed help with project management on a number of his investment properties. And again, I was trying to meet people when I moved here. I was trying to figure out who's in the business. And that's how I met him, was because he needed someone up in where I lived, up in Tampa. He was 2 hours south. He had a bunch of properties up here, and he was struggling with project management on his rehabs. And I was like, well, shit, I'm plugged in up here. I know folks, like literally these things are my backyard. let me help you. And it was a hey, paid help. Like he was actually looking for someone, but ultimately we created a relationship. Like he saw a lot of value in me helping him, and ultimately he knew that I had owned a number of investment properties. So there was a hey, you help me, I help you. Let me show you, what I'm doing over here, how I built this big business. Appreciate what you've done. You really helped me like straighten up my business up there, and it was a win-win, right? And I got to be around somebody that was doing just massive things. And so I guess there's no one way to do it, but like try to figure out what the pain points might be. Um, find someone who's doing what you're doing, that's where you want to be, and then figure out what their pain points are. Everyone's got pain points.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. I mean, everyone's got pain. Like, man, my acquisitions guy that works for me today, I brought him aboard 3 years ago. He's a young guy, really, really smart, wise beyond his years, but I believe he was 23 when I brought him on, which in that position, based on my expectations of him, they were really high. Like it's not just like, hey, you're looking at single family homes. Like he's stepping into underwriting, 10, 20, 30, $40 million deals. And he had some formal education and he had some formal experience with JLL, which is a big commercial brokerage firm, but he didn't have any experience in what we were doing, but he had the hunger to do it. And I could tell he was willing to learn. And ultimately, he came in and like I told him, I said, I'm not a hand holder. I'm not one that like I'm not that type of leader. I'm not going to coddle you. I'm not going to hand hold you. I expect you to be resourceful and just figure shit out. Like literally, you got to figure it out. That's how I work. I just figure it out. And so I expect you to be the same. And I need you to, number one, I'll tell you what my pain points were. Number two, there's other ones I'm not identifying. I need you to figure out what they are. And I need you to take that crap off my plate, right? And like literally, I gave him an opportunity. He came in, and he very quickly figured out what my pain points were. Well, he knew the ones I told him, but ultimately figured out other ones. And he's made my life just 100x easier, and has made us more successful as an organization. So anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling now because I gave you a bunch of examples there. But in any event, like it's adding value, and there's many different ways to do it. It's not just black and white, but that's how you find the right mentor and the right people or person to be around that's going to help you just really elevate your career path or whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a business or a career path, what have you. That's the way to do it.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. So let's kind of move through your story a little. Excuse me, move through your story a little bit, because you're going from buying single family homes, you're doing some deals, you moved to Tampa, and now you're the CEO of a fairly large company that has employees and millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate. So did that just snowball? Like how did you go from doing a couple deals to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, earlier on, I was kind of a one-man band as well. When you're growing your business, there's always these pivotal times where you realize, and most of us, and honestly, like even today, I could probably argue that I'm reactive more than proactive. But there's points in time where like there's only so many hours in a day, there's only so much bandwidth an individual has, right? But like you got to make tough decisions of hiring people proactively, which costs money, which means like less money in your pocket initially, right? Like, and it's hard because when you're growing a business, like a lot of times you're already sacrificing, you're not making money for a period. And when you finally start making money, you're like, this is great, but now I got to take a step back on the money I'm making to bring, talent into the organization. So I can delegate and take some of these loads and, take some of the burden off my plate, and ultimately find people that are better at doing those things that you're not great at doing, right? Like kind of putting the right people in the right seats. And so that's all. I mean, like it was I would say that up until probably like 4 or 5 years ago, it was a fairly, slow evolution. I learned a lot, in the last 20 years, but really in the last 5 years is where we saw some just massive growth within our organization. We've always run pretty lean as a team. We've done some incredible things, but I'd say really in the last 5 years, we've just really taken advice from some larger companies, CEOs that have run just huge organizations as to like, just how do we accelerate our growth? What do we need to do? And ultimately it's truly building out like, how we do it today is we take where do we want to be. We've got, 1, we got 3, we got 5, and then we got really long 10-year goals. And we go through them every year. We review them multiple times throughout the year. And then we, adjust accordingly on a yearly basis. But we have an organizational chart of like, what does it need to look like in 5 years? Like based on that goal, who needs to be in the organization? Not
Hmm.
necessarily a name of the person, but like what title?
A
Like
title.
what's their roles and responsibilities in the org? Like what does we have and now it's, I think it's roughly 8 years out, like, or about 7 years out. We'd like to have $1 billion of assets under management. How does it differ? What does that organization look like to reach $1 billion than what it is today at 300 million? Because I can promise you, it looks very different. Like
Right.
there's more folks in order to get us there, and more talent in order to get us there. And so I think just really backing into it, and that's a critical exercise that we really started implementing like 5 years ago, and it's just accelerated the growth of the organization. It's allowed us to bring in the necessary talent, people that are way smarter than us in the various roles within the organization. Like, and I think it's just being honest with yourself as well. Like, be critical in yourself, and you're really good at probably a lot of things, but you're probably great at like one or two things, right?
Hmm.
And then you're mediocre at a lot of others, right? And like just being honest with yourself and get the ego out of the way, and have some self-realization of like, I'm really good here. This is where I thrive. This is what I enjoy. This is actually the piece of the business that really I enjoy. This is what gets me excited every day. I could get rid of all this other stuff and find other people that are better than you and bring them into the organization, but do it in a timely manner. Like, don't try not to be reactive. I think what happens, a lot of entrepreneurs, they burn themselves out because they never
Hmm.
ever take that critical step to even hiring that first person, start delegating out.
Right.
Because again, it costs money, right? And sometimes you actually might have to invest in it. You might not have a cash flow to actually do it. You might have to say, well, shit, I actually have to put like 30 grand into this thing, like literally out of my own pocket, which I really don't have. And then I need to hope and pray that this person that person should make you equal to what their salary is or more, ideally
Right.
more, right? If you bring the right person in, they should be able to help you grow the organization to where they're always paying for themselves and then some.
Right.
And I think it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough pivotal moment and decision to make at that point in your growth. So, I mean, that's really it. It's been an evolution over 2+ decades. So this hasn't happened overnight. We've learned a lot along the way, made a lot of mistakes, still make mistakes to this day. But I think it's a matter of taking those mistakes, trying to figure out the lesson in them, and then just not making the same mistake the second time around, right? When they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same results. So just keep adapting accordingly, and then look at what other people are doing. Again, kind of back to the whole mentor thing. Like, what other companies do you admire? Have built
Hmm.
amazing organizations. A lot of times it's driven by the leadership. What are they doing that's unique? Do they have some books that you can read? Do they have videos you can watch? Can you learn about the organization? And you'll find that there's common elements amongst all big companies that have grown from basically nothing, from a garage or from a one-man show to, a multi-million or billion-dollar organization. So anyway, again, I tend to ramble, so you can tell me to shut up if I'm saying too much, but I'm going to stop there and give an opportunity for any clarifying questions.
No, this is great. I love it. I love it. I love it. Going back to like that first hire, because I think about that a lot. How do you know, so to speak, when you're ready? So is it a cash flow metric? Is it these are the goals I want to do, I just don't have the time? What would you say that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's yeah, you can answer that many different ways. It's almost never a cash flow metric because you never have enough money to make that first hire. I don't believe. I mean,
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong, but very, very rarely have I seen an instance where, because again, you're building a business, you're sacrificing, and all of a sudden you're starting to put money in your own pocket. Like, this is great. Like, I'm actually being able
Right.
to pay myself now, and now that pay yourself, either some of it or all of it has to go to paying somebody else,
Right.
that you probably feel isn't as qualified as you, right? Because you're the one that founded the company, and now you're bringing in this person. Now they're taking all the money that was in your pocket, right? That's the wrong way to think about it. So I think, the right time to hire is, I think the way I would do if I was starting all over again is I truly would go through the exercise of building out the organizational chart of like, literally, like, as soon as you realize you've got a viable business and you've got money coming in, you need to start setting like, what does the 1 year goal look like? What's your 3 year goals look like? The 5 year, and do your best to come up with whatever you feel. Who are the people that you're going to need to bring into the organization? Be honest with yourself that you can't do it all, and you're not going to be great at doing it all, and you'll probably fail miserably if you try to do it all. Right? Like, you're
Hmm.
going to be out of business if you think that you're going to do it as a solo show. And then, in that first hire typically is someone that you're going to end up making wear a bunch of different hats as well. And so
Hmm.
the first hires typically, it's more just like an admin assistant of some sort, executive assistant, whatever you want to call it. Someone that probably communicates well, probably clerically very organized, and can just help take some of the menial burdens off your plate, like, emails, phone calls, dealing with banks, writing checks or whatever, making, accounts payable, accounts receivable, whatever your business is, right? Like just doing the menial tasks that you should have been outsourcing to begin with. But I think it's a sooner rather than later. I don't know if what the right time is, but if you see growth, if you've got a viable business and you got an idea and it's making money, sooner rather than later, because very quickly you're going to find yourself in a situation that you're now in a reactive state. You're out of time, you're out of bandwidth, and it's very difficult to hire in those situations because you end up hiring the wrong person because now you're desperate, right? Like you're at a point you're like, oh my God, like my girlfriend just left me because I literally I missed our last 3 dates. I don't have any time today, or I've got kids and like literally I'm not going to their games. I mean, I'm a horrible father. Like I feel like shit. And literally I can't even sleep. I'm so stressed. It's like, now you're going to go try hire somebody. That's a problem, right? Like number one, you're going to exude the wrong qualities, right? Like they're not going to see probably you for who you really are. They're going to see the stressed out, just, trying to dig yourself out which, they might find attraction in that. They might say, I want to be a part of this ride. Like I love chaos. I want to come in and help fix things. Right. But ideally you want to do it before you find yourself in that state. And, anyway, so again, I don't know if there's a right time, but that'd be my advice on how I would look at it. Again, if I was building it out again, I would again just start with the end in mind. And then whatever that org chart shows of like, if you're going to try to tie it to like financial metrics, like I'm going to hire this person here, probably back it up. Like you put your mark there and just agree with yourself that you're going to do it sooner than that.
Okay. So when did you hire your first person? Like what was the business looking like?
Yeah, see, I hired late. Yeah, I hired really late. I mean, I literally got to the point to where I was managing. I owned. This is down here in Florida. I had about 35, somewhere between 30 and 40 single family properties I was managing, and I was literally doing it. I wasn't swinging the hammer. So like I had some handyman, but they're all like they're like, independent contractors I worked with. Like, so I didn't do like the rehabs. I didn't do any of the, the maintenance work. Like I had guys that would do that stuff that were not on payroll per se, but just 1099.
Sure.
But I was still dealing with the accounts payable, accounts receivable. I was dealing with just, posting ads for leasing, taking phone calls from, prospects, running credit checks, background checks, all that stuff, writing leases. And so the first person I hired was literally just an admin assistant, and I did it too late. I mean, I was like literally, again, I didn't have a wife, didn't have kids. I had a social life, but I really didn't anymore. Like I was running myself rampant, and I was literally working nonstop, night and day, and it wasn't fun at all. It was not fun. And I'm sure the business suffered. I don't know to what degree, but I'm sure the business suffered, or I didn't grow as fast because I didn't make that first hire, right? But when I made that first hire, she came in and she took so much, just the admin crap, I mean, just writing leases and sending them out for signature, getting them back fully executed, scanning them in, just that little stuff, and it's a lot easier today with technology than what it was back then. Right. But like that one step I just mentioned, like that could have taken a couple of hours to literally draft a lease, get it assigned by all parties, scan it back in, and, maybe not hours, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, so that was
a mental lift.
Absolutely. I mean, she took all that burden. She started posting ads for me. She started just doing all the menial tasks that were just bulking me down and that were keeping me from going out buying more property. Right. Like what I enjoy doing is actually, I enjoy doing deals. I enjoy buying buying assets at great prices in great markets, great locations. And I didn't have time left to do it, so like my growth probably got stinted another number of times until I really started bringing talent in. So,
and so for these deals, were you raising money from outside investors? Were you just using?
Yeah. We had my own money to a certain degree, but business looked very different back then than what it looks like today. Most of our private investors were debt lenders. I mean, they were coming in. Again, we were buying single family homes, small multifamily properties. So a lot of our investors were high net worth individuals, but they had 401ks or IRAs, self-directed IRAs, and they would come in and then make loans to us. Simple first lien position loans. And sometimes they would finance some of the rehab, if not all the rehab, right? So, but basically what would happen is our investor lender would come in, finance the deal, finance a lot of times a portion of the rehab, and we'd buy a couple homes every month. have these different, first lien position loans in place. And then once we had a batch of, 3 to 5, maybe sometimes more than that, homes that were stabilized, meaning that they were renovated, they're rented, had income coming in, then we would go get a bank loan and typically kind of package up a number of those properties, 5 of them, and then take out the private lenders, and then allowed that private lender to, again, turn around and lend again. So we had a number of private lenders that we worked with, but a lot of the same ones, because we'd recycle them you get their cash back every, call it 6 months, maybe sometimes a bit longer than that, depending on the rehab. They get paid. Yeah. And they get paid points in their money, right? Like they would, back then it was like, gosh, it's probably like 12% and 2 points origination. So they were fine. They were making their money on the interest as well as the origination points of the loan. And so for them, it was better to actually recycle. They made more money by recycling on a regular basis, less than a 12-month spend time.
Right. And so I think you said it, but these were high net worth individuals that you just knew in your network, and they had 401ks, or
I just got to know them through real estate meetings, going to local real estate investment club meetings, and then word of mouth, typically birds of a feather flock together, right? Like we had one guy that he was a retiree, but he played golf quite often. So we ended up having literally a number of his golfing buddies that became lenders of ours, because again, they were all high net worth individuals. They were retired, looking for creative ways to, supplement their retirement or increase their net worth. And so again, just found a few, and then ultimately the word spread. And I don't think we never did like any proactive marketing, seeking lenders. Most of it was either an investment club that we met a few folks, and then from there it just kind of spawned. It became not wide, but really the relationships became more deep. First couple, and then ultimately they talked to their friends, their colleagues, whoever it might be, and ultimately that's where a lot of it came from.
Got it. Man, and I know we're running a little short on time, but I need to understand how the heck you went from single family homes to parking lots. Like, that's one of the most interesting investment strategies I've ever heard.
Yeah, well,
and I'm sure there's a ton.
It didn't go just like that. Well, I lost mostly everything in 2008, and I had some reflection, a couple of years of reflection. Just number one, from 2008 to 2011, it was just really working damage control, trying to dig my way out of the chaos. And so I didn't buy anything in those 3 years. I did start a few other businesses we don't need to talk about today. I started a few other businesses. I need to keep a roof over my head, but it wasn't real estate related. And but my hunger for real estate was still there, and not until late 2011 did I really dive back in. But it was I reflected back on what I thought worked, what didn't work, and how I would do it better the second time around. And that's how I ran across mobile home parks, just by accident. Like originally the plan was buying larger multifamily, because that was just a more efficient model than all the single family stuff I had.
Sure.
And through happenstance, I met a gentleman. He was a commercial banker for 30 years, happened to retire from commercial banking, ended up buying a couple mobile home parks here in Florida. And I had lunch with him one day, and I'd never considered that asset class. And he got me so excited after 2 hours of meeting with him. And it wasn't about mobile home. Our meeting wasn't supposed to be about mobile home parks. So that's what it turned into. And I went, and that's when I bought that first one. I bought it. It took me about a year to buy it, but I went and bought the first one because I was so excited after meeting this guy, Randy, and him speaking of all the great things about mobile home parks. And that's how the mobile home park thing started. And then, I started my podcast, which I think I might have referenced. I started it 11 years ago in 2014. And it's commercial real estate based. And so I interview guys that own mobile home parks, that own office buildings, retail, whatever it might be, that's kind of their investment vehicle. And every once in a while I'll get kind of niche segments on. For example, years back before car washes were cool, I did a whole segment where I interviewed, I think, 6 or 7 different folks across the country that, had big car wash chains. I did a laundromat chain segment, a bowling alley segment. I did all these cool segments of just like these one-off weird niches. One of those random conversations happened to be a guy that owned a bunch of parking lots and parking garages. And that was about 7 years ago. And that was the one where I got off that interview, and I didn't know much about the asset class. Again, we all know someone owns the parking lots that we park in, right? Either a municipality owns it or someone private owns it. We've all paid to park. It's one of those asset classes I'd never considered. And I was so intrigued after the interview with him that I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I don't like diluting focus. I mean, we were steadfast focused on mobile home parks. Like that was our lane. We like to be experts at what we do. And I don't agree that you can do all things great. I truly think that you need to find one thing and become an expert at it. And so I was always weary of chasing shiny objects or getting a
Sure.
diluted focus. And so, but this is that one call where I literally called him up a couple days later. I'm like, man, I got so many more questions that I just would love to just chat with you, and then that turned into, I flew him to Tampa and I spent a day with him, just trying to, he was a broker as well. And so he made money. He would have made money if we would have bought something. Right. So he had
Right.
opportunities that he was also coming across. So it wasn't a one-sided, hey, just tell me everything and don't get anything in return. And again, that turned into basically my partner and I looked at each other. We're like, well, let's just learn as much as we can. Let's focus on some mobile home parks. And so we went to all the association meetings for the industry, got to know people, spent about 2.5 years, maybe even close to 3, probably 2 to 3 years, just not buying anything, looking at deals, underwriting deals, trying to understand the nuance in the space. And then we bought the first one in 2020. So it took us a couple of years of just really trying to understand the investment thesis of it and get comfortable with it and ensure that it was complementary to what we were doing. It wasn't going to dilute our focus, but not even that, but even getting our investors educated about it, trying to educate them ahead of time. Because again, there's no information out there in investing in parking lots. It's not a well-known niche at all. And no one really, you can't go buy a book on it. Can't go download a white paper from a website. And so we had to educate our investors as to why we were so excited about it before we were asking them for money. And so that's how it all started. And so we bought that first one in 2020. And it's still a minority part of our portfolio. It makes up, we've got 4 parking assets at present. So we basically have bought one a year for the last 4 years. And we've got one under contract now. So hopefully we'll buy one or more this year. But they're pretty big assets. Last year we closed the one in December, and it's called Uptown Charlotte. They don't call it their downtown; they call it their uptown. That's where that's where the thriving concentration is. That's their central business district, and but it's a 800 stall garage across from the Spectrum Center where the Charlotte Hornets play. Anyway, it's right in the heart of downtown, and where all the events happen, and lots of restaurants and nightlife, entertainment, sports games, music, all that kind of stuff. And so they're pretty big deals. Like that was $30 million transaction. So most of them they tend to be larger. I'd say 20 to probably $40 million transactions. But it still makes up a small piece of our portfolio. But I mean, I love the investment thesis of it. They're not making more parking. They're truly not. And all the parking we buy, last year we looked at over 100 deals. We underwrote, went through the full underwrite process probably on about, I think it was a dozen, and we bought one, right? And so there's a lot of boxes we have to check in order for a deal to really fit our criteria. And so what we're looking for is, number one, it's got to be in a phenomenal market that's growing. It's got to be like a booming market. So bought Charlotte last year. The year before that, we bought one in downtown Phoenix. The year before that, we bought one in Clearwater Beach, which is in our backyard here, like number 1 beach in the country. Year before that, we bought one in downtown Wilmington, North Carolina, historic district. So it's got to be, and the one we have in contract now is in Philadelphia, in Old Town Philadelphia, phenomenal location. So for us, it's got to be irreplaceable real estate. It's got to stand alone. It's got to make sense economically as parking. So it's got to have a viable business model around parking, meaning that the demand is still incredibly high. We see the demand staying high for the next decade. It's got to stand on its own for the next decade as parking. But what we do know is that inevitably at some point in time, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, there will probably be a point in time where parking might not be the highest and best use, depending on how vehicles go with autonomous vehicles, flying vehicles, drones carrying us places, who knows, right? But at some point in time, there will probably be a higher and better use than that of parking. But we know that the piece of real estate we sit on is irreplaceable. Like it is the best in the marketplace. And for now, we can have cash flow and essentially hold on to that piece of land until there's a better way to generate cash flow than that of parking. So it's kind of a long-term hold strategy, but we can make money while we're holding that piece of irreplaceable, incredibly located land.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. And yeah, that makes total sense. Because like every time I park, I'm like, who owns this? And I'm sure like now, do you find yourself as you're driving around, you're like looking at parking garages differently?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always, every time I drive around, whether it's parking garages or any other type of real estate, it's always just like the real estate itself excites me. Just locations, or if we see new developments going on, I'm like, man, I was wondering how long it was going to take someone to put that there, like build something there, and I'm like, and I'm always like, I'm glad they built that. That's what I thought would be best. Or it's like, wow, they're actually they're doing condos instead of whatever I thought would have been the ideal, right? Like, just
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued by how other how other people, developers or investors are viewing their investments, or what their investment thesis is, and just kind of reasons for them, either
Right.
investing in a certain area or in a certain property or developing something. Yeah, but it's always on my mind. And yeah, but no, that's the story of parking. So it was an accident, like these things most of the time are. Um, but I think it's just, I'm always, I try to dilute focus, but I keep my ears open, man. Like, I want to hear something unique, and I want to hear something that's somewhat against the grain, or going against the herd. Like mobile home parks, now that everyone talks about them, there's a million podcasts on it. But
Right.
honestly, when we started buying them, no one was talking about them. Like, it wasn't a thing. There was no institutional capital in our space. I mean, it was a mom and pop industry. In fact, when I launched, I had a mobile home park podcast. I still have it. I don't do it on a regular basis, but I launched that in 2016. It was the only one. And it was the only one for like 3 years. Now I think there's probably like a dozen of them, right? And so
Right.
no one was talking about it. No one was educating about it. It was this kind of this hidden niche. I almost regret maybe posting that podcast because I gave all the secrets out. Maybe it would have taken a little more time for it to gain traction, right? But I don't have a scarcity mentality. I think there's always enough opportunity out there for all of us. And again, I'd prefer to help, because a number of the deals we own today, or a number of things we bought over the years, came as a result of that podcast. I met folks through that podcast, got connections, found deals. And so without that, I wouldn't have, maybe bought a number of the transactions that we ended up doing. So it was a win-win.
Very cool. And yeah, I think everyone who listened to your podcast and now invests in mobile home parks is thanking you for putting it out there. Let's transition a little bit, just as we wrap up here, towards time management. You're doing a lot. You're a super busy guy. Like you said, you don't have a lot of time. Walk us through like a tip, like a Tuesday. What does a Tuesday look like? What time are you waking up? What are you doing? What time are you starting work? How do you fit all the buckets of your life in?
Yeah, and I will say that I've done really well. I am incredibly busy still. It seems like even though I have a kind of an easy week, it's my calendar. The day before, the next day seems to feel. I don't know how it happens, but like things just get thrown on my calendar, right? But um, uh, I'd say a Tuesday. Use Tuesday as an example. Tuesday's a unique day because it's the one day on my calendar that's always full, and the reason is that we do our leadership. We do an hour and a half leadership meeting with the executive team every Tuesday morning, and that's an hour and a half long. And then I record all my podcasts. Anything I'm doing podcast wise, whether and typically even if I'm being a guest on the show, not the one we're doing today, but if I'm being a guest or I'm recording something for my show, I do it on Tuesdays. And so Tuesdays are pretty stacked with me doing interviews, the podcast, any other types of video content I need to create for our team. If I need to do any type of intros or outros or promotions, I do it on Tuesday. So I stack Tuesdays pretty heavily. As far as like waking up, I'm an earlier. I'm not a born early riser. I have stuff to force myself. I do a lot of long distance cycling. I ride Tuesdays and Thursday mornings with a group, and they happen to leave at like 5:30 in the morning, but they leave like an hour away from my house. And so I wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I ride down to meet them. And I ride, I end up, putting in about 40 miles, and I get home, by 7 a.m. And that's right when my family's waking up, the kids are waking up for school. But I'm always around if I'm not traveling, I go look at every property we buy. So like I put my eyes on everything before we ever buy it. And so that's typically the time I'm traveling. But if I'm not traveling, I want to see the kids off before they go to school, with my wife in the morning, help them get the kids ready and, pack lunches and all that kind of stuff. They're 8 and 11. So they still need us to do things for them, to a certain degree. And then outside of that, I'm pretty critical about trying to end my day by 5 p.m. Surely it goes over if it has to, but I try to be available and present for my wife and kids, and try not to miss practice, the different sports are in or games or anything like that. So, I would say years past, it would have been very not different of like missing that stuff, but like my days would have been a lot more chaotic. But with the team, going back to the whole team element of it, like for example, my acquisitions guy, like we're pretty lean on our acquisition side, but he is so talented. We've got a couple assistants that help us as well. But like 4 years ago, even, that was just me. And I was running every aspect of not just finding properties, not just underwriting them, but actually running due diligence all the way through, being boots on the ground, meeting with vendors, all this stuff. But now we've got a number of other team members that help with all those different aspects, allowing me to just focus on finding opportunities, they get underwritten, and then they come to me. Like literally, we've got an analyst, he underwrites them. I only see him once it's like they've kind of checked most of our boxes, and I put my eyes on it to do some final tweaks and say, let's make an offer, or it doesn't work for this reason or another, right? And so my days are busy, but like I would say that I've been working very diligently to buy my time back, and buy it back by bringing talent on the team, because really the reason why we do this whole thing, I mean, maybe it's not for the folks that are listening, maybe it's not your reason, but my reason is the one thing that you can't create more of is time. And really, I want to leverage this business to not only serve our residents that live in our communities, not only to serve our employees that work for us, right? Like, we view all of them as family, but really it's my family as well. Like to buy back my own time so that I can spend more quality time with my family, right? And so like I work really hard to ensure that I'm not jam-packed every day of the week, although a lot of weeks I am, but like I want to buy back as much time as possible. And so I'm not that guy I'm definitely not the guy that's like, rise and grind. Like I wake up at 4:30 a.m. and I start working. I get as much done by 9 a.m. than most of you guys get done in, an entire week. And I think that's fine for some, but I don't think that's a legitimate balance at all. For me, it's all about like being really efficient, but being balanced as well. And I'm very okay with having gaps in my schedule during the week. You know what I mean? I'll find stuff to fill it with. I'll go exercise. I'll go, grab one of my kids from school and take them to lunch. You know what I mean?
Right.
That type of stuff. So I like trying to find gaps in my schedule during the week. And a lot of times I can.
Man.
So not sure if that answers your question or not.
I'm exhausted just hearing that, how much you cycle on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like those are probably I hate waking up that early. I've always admired folks that can truly wake up at like 4:30 a.m. It's funny because my original mentor, David, that guy would just wake up at 5 a.m. no matter what. In fact, he saw it as a hindrance. He was like, man, I literally just can't sleep in. I wake up at 5. I'm like, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
I was like, I would love this to be able to naturally wake up and be awake at 5 a.m. And no matter what I've done over the years, no matter what time I go to bed at night, no matter how good a sleep I get, it just definitely does not naturally happen. So trying to create a habit out of it, I've tried and it just doesn't work. I really love sleep and I think it's good for you anyway. So like I could care less about just saying I got up early, get up early. So anyway, back to the point that cycling days, I hate waking up that early. However, those days, I by far have the most amount of energy. Once I'm done with that ride, like I crawl out of bed, I get on the bike. I probably don't even know what the hell I'm doing for the first hours. I'm like, because I have like a warm up ride to go meet everyone. I ride like 13 miles to meet the group. And then we hammer it really hard. But by the time I get home, man, I've gotten a legit workout in, and my mind is so clear and so focused. And I get more done on those 2 days probably than any other days of the week. And that's why Tuesdays are the days I also do our leadership meeting, and I also do all the podcast interviews and all that. So like I feel like I'm sharp, but I'm definitely as sharp as a tack on those respective days. But I don't think I'd be able to do that every day. Just I like my sleep. So
for sure. It's important. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kevin, where can people find out more about you? I know that you're all over the internet. You've written a couple books.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about our company, I mean, what we're doing over there, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. We've got a good bit of resources there. We've got a current offering you can read about. We've got, kind of case studies on deals we've done historically. Some we still own, some we don't. So we try to provide a good bit of information there. We've also got some white papers you can download that are free. One's on parking investments if you want to learn more about that. One's on mobile home park investments. You can also listen to my podcast through that site as well. And then I think outside of that, just I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well, but I'd say LinkedIn's probably the one I'm most active on. And my last name's unique enough that if you just type in Kevin Bupp, Bupp, you'll quickly find me. I think I should be the first result that comes up, unless there's another Kevin Bupp real estate investor that's been born without me knowing it.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate you and your time, and this was super valuable and fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me.
All righty. Bye, everybody.